When I was visiting hell, it took us 365 days. Every day we had to visit a chamber of hell. There are 351 chamber of torment in hell, where souls are sent according to their sins. There are chamber for thieves, prostitute, Satanist and witches. The predominant sin in your life will determine the chamber you will be sent. People commit all kind of sin, but there are sin that are prevalent and repetitive in their lives. These are sins that will determine the chamber of hell you will be sent if you fail to renounce and free yourself now. You must fight the good fight of faith and overcome this willful sin that has attached itself to you. On that day after visiting the chamber of those who bleach their skin to make it lighter, and those who modify their natural appearance, the Lord took me back home. I was tormented by the suffering, atrocities and tortures that I saw in that dreadful place of continual torment, and I was crying all that night because of the degree of torment and suffering that is in that place. I never thought that men could be subjected to such unbearable level of pain. The degree of fire in hell is unbearable for human. The torment that I saw in hell I have never been able to measure and evaluate its degree in my human mind. What is beyond suffering, woe and torture is what I saw in hell. Before leaving me at home the Lord said, "The next day I will come again so that we may continue our journey." I kept saying to the Lord, "You don't need to come, for I will warn humanity and tell them that hell is real, but I don't want to go back to that place. That place is dreadful. I will warn the world because of the degree of fire and suffering that does not exist on the earth." Brother, sin is leading many to hell, but all the sin are not forgiven the same way before God, and they don't have the same consequence and punishment. That is why there are many prison of hell. There are degree of sin. There are sin that require reparation. These are sin that cannot be forgiven unless they are repaired. God does not forgive every sin in the same way, for each sin has condition, law and prerequisite to be done in order to obtain the forgiveness of the Lord. The Lord has set out principle for every sin that we should follow in order to be forgiven. We are talking about the reparation of sin, and there are many kinds of sins. If you don't know how God forgives sin, you will think that God has already forgiven you, and in the end you will suffer beyond the grave in the place of torment because you thought that God forgive all the sin in the same way. But all the crime do not have the same sanction. There are sin, crimes or infraction that require you to pay the penalty. These sanction and penalty are set up in the law. Likewise with the Lord, all sin lead to the final destination, which is hell. However, when a man is alive on the earth, all the sin are repairable, except the blaspheme against the Holy Spirit. But if you fail to comply to the penalty of the sin you have committed, you are in trouble. You may think that you are forgiven, but in that day of judgment you will be surprised. Beloved, we are living in the most difficult age of our faith. This is the time of election where many will be disqualified and few will be qualified. The election of the elect is taking place. I would like to mention a particular sin that also has its condition and principle that we should follow in order to be forgiven. We are talking about the sin of debt. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this the servant fell on his knees before him. "Be patient with me," he begged, "and I will pay back everything." The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay it back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. We understand that there is hidden sin in debt. We all get indebted one way or another. There are spiritual loans, like when your parents are indebted and they died. Children are supposed to pay these debts. If you fail to pay your debt in the physical world, you will pay it beyond the grave. You may suffer reclamation. We have many issues in our life because of spiritual loans and debt of our ancestors, and there is reclamation. Whenever you are indebted, you become slave of your debtor, and whenever you stand before your debtor, you tremble and your heart is shattered, for he can shout at you and speak to you in a disrespectful way even before people. You won't react because your mind is already reproaching you and telling you that you owe him something. This also happens when we are facing reclamation in the spirit world, when people give us things in life, when people help us when we are in need. Whatever they give us, give them access in our life. They can come to us to get something since they help us when we were in need. This is moral debt. When someone tend to offer you things all the time, this good that he is doing to you is a moral debt, that give him advantage to you. Do not always accept offer because you become indebted to the person. He may come back to get something from you because he gave you when you were in need. That is why women are not supposed to accept offer and things from men, for fear that the latter feel that you owe him something. This is actually a hidden debt that people call moral debt. Whatever people give us belong to them. They can claim it, unless the law certify that it now belongs to you. Otherwise the owner can still make a claim. There is also debt of responsibility. This is when you are entrusted, for example, money to do a service. Even if money is left after you have got the service done, the remaining money does not belong to you. It's actually theft. The sins of debt is leading many to hell, and debt must be repaid. On that day, despite my plea, the following day the Lord Jesus Christ came to take me again, and we landed outside the chamber of those who bleach their skins, where we ended our journey. I said, Lord, this is beyond understanding. Why would people that bleach their sins be tortured in unbearable fire of hell? The Lord read my thought and said, my ways are above your way. I am not what Christian and the world of men think I am. Your mind cannot grasp and master who I am. I am beyond what you think in human mind. The only way to see my face is to keep my words. My words reveal who I am, but feeling and emotion has entered the church, replacing life in the church. I was walking with the Lord in the darkness of hell, but a much deeper darkness was moving towards us in our direction. We were moving forward in a kind of darkness that you will never see on earth. As we kept moving forwards, the deep darkness kept coming towards us. When we had entered the deep darkness, we kept moving, and finally we entered the dark tunnel. We began to see rain of lava falling on souls that were here. I began to hear piercing screams that came from all sides. I could not determine whether they came from before us or behind or beneath the ground. I was hearing piercing screams of thousand upon thousand of souls. The darkness was so evil that I stayed close to the Lord. I knew that without him I would never leave this dreadful place. Finally we reached a crossroad that led to four prison of hell. Along the way we came across a group of demons moving on the road. They had all kind of torture instrument and they had weapon on their hand. These wicked spirits were well armed, and they seemed like a group of hunters going to hunt their preys. They were vicious and cruel, and they were holding sharp instrument of torture. They seemed to be going on an expedition to a particular prison of hell to torture souls, for in hell souls suffer from the fire that burn them. Then they are also tortured and mutilated by sharp instrument of demon. This is because Lucifer, who is angry against God, know that his punishment in the lake of fire and brimstone is imminent, and in order to satisfy his anger against God he created demon who will torture the image and the likeness of God. I watched this group of demon and they were passing. I saw that they were of all shapes and all forms. Some of them were like human, but they were very robust because demons are always of big size. One of them had eyes all over his head. Some of them were holding machete, sword, javelin, arrows, even weapon and cutting instrument we don't have on the earth. I saw that some of these infernal demons looked like dragon and reptiles, for they were scary beasts. But some of these demons were extremely beautiful like fallen angels, and they were shining and were very handsome. They held swords on their hand. They all seems like hunters not in search of animals but human souls that were falling in this path because of sin, especially the sin of debt. The Bible say, a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. So Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. Then he said, go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors' empty vessels. Do not gather just a few, and when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels, and set aside the full ones. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel," and he said to her, "There is not another vessel," so the oil ceased. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rees."